I took Kieran in when he was at his lowest. I was the one who taught him how to yield and strike back at the negotiating table, how to carve his way through the business world. Later, he rose to the peak of his career, brilliant, unstoppable. And just like a blind man who regains his sight and immediately discards his cane, the first thing he did was cast me aside. So it didn't surprise me at all when I overheard him telling his friends, Victor Frost? Old-fashioned. Dull. And besides, he's not young anymore. I stood at the door of the private room, a faint itch rising in my throat. I could already picture that young, handsome man narrowing his eyes slightly, speaking those careless words as if they meant nothing. In the end, I was the one who had been pushing too hard, forcing a young soul to stay by my side for so long. Maybe because I had always known this day would come, I didn't feel overwhelming grief, just a fleeting sadness, quickly replaced by the heavy relief of a stone finally falling to the ground. Now the only question left was how to end this arrangement that had long since lost its original shape, gracefully, cleanly. After failing to think of a solution, I walked toward the restroom and lit a cigarette. I studied the reflection in the mirror. A neatly pressed coat. Hair styled with gel, though 2 strands had slipped loose in my rush to get here. The fine lines at the corners of my eyes, impossible to hide. The longer I spent with Kieran Vale, the more I became aware of the gap between us. 7 years. He burned brightly, brimming with youth and vitality. And I, already steady, already crossing the threshold of 35. My energy waning, my stamina no longer what it once was. I let out a quiet, self-mocking laugh. Moments later, I stubbed out the cigarette and fanned away the lingering smoke. Then I returned to the door of the private room and pushed it open. The noise in the room died down in an instant. Only the music remained, piercing and gut-wrenching. And there he was, Kieran Vale. He lounged lazily against the sofa, one arm draped across the backrest. A strikingly handsome young man sat pressed close beside him. Like a predator marking his territory, the boy's arm circled possessively around Kieran. I knew who he was. Simon Shaw. I had seen his file before. Compared to the photos, in person he looked even younger, his skin soft and fresh, as if you could squeeze water from it. No wonder he had once played the role of someone's kept canary. The boy blinked, clearly not yet processing how strange this situation had become. Victor. Victor, why are you here? Someone who knew me stammered. Another fumbled with the sound system, trying to shut it off. They failed, and only managed to turn the volume up. A haunting DJ remix filled the private room, turning the scene in front of me into something almost ridiculous. Finally, one of the drunker guests yanked the power cord. The room fell into silence, heavy and awkward. My arrival, as always, seemed hopelessly out of place among these young people. I kept a polite smile, lifting my wrists slightly as though checking the time. It's getting late. I finished work earlier than expected, so I came to take Kieran home. As I spoke, my eyes swept toward him. Kieran seemed momentarily dazed, his brows tightening ever so slightly. His hand shifted, moving protectively to shield Simon's curious gaze from me. Simon pouted and leaned against his shoulder with practiced affection. Intimate. Unashamed. Kieran's silence told me everything I needed to know. He was young, reckless, and in a few days, I would be 35. The dignity of adulthood kept my smile in place as I added, "But something's come up at the office. I'll need to head back. I ordered some food for you all. Drinking too much on an empty stomach is rough." "Thank you, Victor," someone murmured. Simon glanced around, hearing the others echo me as Victor, and then chimed in brightly. "Thank you, Victor. Huh? This name sounds familiar. Oh, isn't this the old guy you told me about, Kieran?" The words slipped out before he realized how they sounded. His hands flew up dramatically to cover his mouth, his eyes curving into playful crescents. "Oops, sorry, Victor. Honestly, you don't look as old as Kieran made you sound. You've still got that uncle charm. Maybe I should just call you Uncle Victor instead." Young, brash, even his arrogance had a kind of innocence to it. The sting of his words was faint, more like a dull ache than a wound. But still, it was there. Compared to before, though, it was bearable. Lowering my gaze, wariness tugging at me, I lit another cigarette. A moment later, my voice came out calm and detached. "Kieran, clear the room. I need to talk to you." The young man withdrew his hand, his gaze clouded as it swept across my face. He knew. This was my final warning. I didn't know if he truly feared I might lash out at the crowd of pretty little playthings around him, but after a pause, he stood up. "Everyone, leave." "Kieran?" Simon Shaw tried again, unwilling to give up. Kieran lifted his eyelids just enough to glance at him, his voice flat. Get out! Simon shot me one last resentful glare before following the others out of the private room. When the door closed, I let out a long, heavy sigh. Through the haze of smoke, I watched his blurred silhouette. He stood 3 steps away. Not too far, not too close. Just enough distance to remind me of the faint detachment between us, the same as the day we first met. What he never knew was just how far I'd walked to reach him back then. At that time, he wore clothes so washed out they'd faded to white, his head lowered as he scrubbed dishes. His hands, swollen from the water, cracked and bleeding from the winter air. I had walked right up to him. The boy tilted his head to look at me, his eyes flashing with the wary light of a cornered animal. I said, "Do you want to come with me?" Back then, I had only just started building my own life. Money was tight, every day a struggle. But I forced myself to act generous, terrified he'd see through my ill-fitted suit and notice my desperation. Kieran's pupils trembled, his chapped lips pressed tightly together. I told him, "I'll pay your tuition. You can focus on your studies without worry." In those days, my words were clumsy and heavy-handed. Just like my father, I thought where there was money, there was love. I placed love on the scales of wealth as if the two were interchangeable, only realizing later that it all reeked of desire disguised as kindness. My shallow experience blinded me to his silent suffering. When he smiled at me, I thought it was gratitude. I felt proud that I had the power to help the one I liked. He signed the contract with me, a sponsorship arrangement, but it had long since soured into something closer to a cage. Only as the years went by, after being worn down by society, did I finally taste the bitterness, the humiliation hidden in that smile. Pain, it seemed, had a time delay, and the cracks between us only grew wider. Every time I earned money, half of it went straight into his account, almost by reflex. But I knew. He never touched it. Now he earned far more than I ever could. A rising star, a leader in the industry. I saw his face countless times in the news. Kieran. I heard myself call his name. He didn't react much. Those dark, fathomless eyes just fixed on me in silence. This Saturday, our contract ends. My voice was calm, carefully restrained. Until then, I don't want to see this again. Kieran gave no answer. Over time, his words to me had grown fewer. Silence filled the spaces where conversation once lived. What we had left was nothing more than polite distance, a facade of civility. And then, finally, he spoke. "Smoking is bad for your health. You promised me you'd quit." I nodded and crushed the cigarette out. He bent forward, pulled a tissue, dampened it with water. Then, with deliberate care, he caught my wrist and wiped the ashes from my fingertips. "The contract is ending," he murmured. "Do you plan to renew it?" I withdrew my hand. "No, I won't. You should be free now." "You have a birthday this Saturday," he reminded me softly. I shook my head and smiled faintly. "At my age, I stopped celebrating a long time ago." His black eyes stayed on me, steady, searching. But I could no longer read him. What lay beneath that calm expression I couldn't tell. After a suffocating silence, his voice came again, quiet but sure. "You've been counting the days, haven't you?" It wasn't an accusation, just a simple truth, spoken aloud. And he already knew the answer. I gave a small nod. When the contract ended, we would finally be free of this twisted, distorted relationship. The bridge would be the bridge. The road would be the road. Whatever paths we chose, be they rough or bright, they would no longer cross. All right. As I expected, he agreed without hesitation. Crisp, clean. When I first began marking the days, I had thought, when it ended, I would confess. I would bare my wretched yet sincere heart to him. But now I believed his happiness mattered more. He was right. I was no longer young. I couldn't use my selfish desires to shackle a free soul. Kieran straightened the collar of my coat, his touch steady, almost gentle. "Going home now?" he asked. I gestured toward my phone. "Not yet. Something's come up at the company. I need to head back." He gave a wordless hum, expression unreadable. "Want me to drive you?" "No. You've been drinking. I brought my own car." "All right." His eyes dropped, his voice softer now. "I thought you came to pick me up." I turned to look at him, startled. "What?" Kieran repeated in the same calm, steady tone. "I thought you came to take me home, Victor." The words were quiet, unemotional on the surface, yet they lingered in the air like something unspoken, refusing to fade. I didn't understand what he meant by those words. When I returned to the company, I found my supervisor still there. "Victor, why are you back?" he asked, briefcase in hand, clearly ready to head home. I offered a small smile. "Thought I'd grab a few hours' sleep in the dorm." His brows lifted, surprised. He knew I had an apartment here. "Oh, that reminds me." He slapped his forehead as if something had just come to mind. Digging into his briefcase, he pulled out a notice and handed it over. "There's a project in Africa. Looks like we'll need someone from the tech department to go along. Probably a 3-year assignment. Ask around, see if anyone's willing." I lowered my gaze to scan the paper. Far, remote, harsh conditions. My team, they were all young, barely starting out. After a moment's thought, I asked quietly, "Rwanda? Do they have leopards there?" He stared at me. "Do I look like a leopard to you?" I couldn't help a soft chuckle. "I'll go." His eyes widened. "What's gotten into you? Nursing a broken heart, planning to exile yourself?" I sighed. "Something like that." "No wonder you're staying in the dorm tonight." He shook his head. "Listen, once your name goes up, you can't take it back. Think it through carefully. Sometimes if you just talk things out with the one you love, the problem isn't as bad as you imagine." He glanced at the clock. "Anyway, give me an answer by Friday. We need the list before Sunday, since that's when you—" But his phone cut him off with a sharp ring. "Ah, my wife's calling. She's been waiting. I'd better go." He gave me an apologetic smile, scratching his head awkwardly, before nodding at me and hurrying out with his briefcase. I nodded back, watching him leave with a quiet envy. How nice it must be to have someone waiting at home. But Kieran and I, we could never sit down and talk things through like that. The only thing that bound us together was the word love. Every morning when I woke, every night when I reached for someone to hold, there was only the cold emptiness of the blankets. He never wore cologne, not even his scent lingered. Just the faint, impersonal trace of the same body wash I used myself. Now that I thought of it, he'd never once called to ask when I was coming home. And yet, I longed for that. To build a family, a life where someone would wait for me, worry for me, reach for me. But Kieran Vale, he wasn't that kind of man, and so all I could feel was a quiet regret. I lay down on the dormitory bed, closing my eyes. Just then, a text message arrived. It was from an unmarked number. Attached was a photo. Kieran Vale and Simon Shaw. Kieran wore a plain hoodie, his expression unreadable, yet there was something uncharacteristically youthful about him. Simon leaned against his shoulder, laughing brightly, carefree. The photo was brimming with the raw energy of youth. I saved it, zoomed in, cropped it, until only Kieran remained, because I had never seen him like this. Back in college, I hadn't dared to wait for him at the school gate, afraid my presence would tarnish his reputation. Even after starting work, I kept my distance, always watching from the shadows. My eyes ached from staring at my phone too long, so I sent back a reply, just 3 thumbs up, nothing more. Shut off my phone and went to sleep. That night, I dreamed. I saw myself at 25, and Kieran at 18, washing dishes in the back of a shabby restaurant. I was fresh out of graduate school, leading a research team on a breakthrough project. For the first time, I'd earned real money. Confidence burned in my eyes, a reckless spark only youth could hold. Even in a cheap, ill-fitting suit, people mistook me for someone fashionable, someone destined to succeed. In my dream, I barged drunkenly into the kitchen, shouting his name. The boy froze, dish rag in hand. His black eyes flickered with confusion as he looked at me. Of course, he didn't recognize me. He didn't remember the few times we had crossed paths. I steadied my breath, introducing myself. "My name's Victor Frost. Graduate of Westfield University, master's from Clearview. I know your situation. Working here won't cover your tuition. If you come with me, I can help you." Such foolish words. In the dream, I folded my arms, leaning against the wall, watching the scene unfold. I shouldn't have rushed in like that. I should have helped him quietly, anonymously, until he made it through school. Maybe then, in his memory, I wouldn't be a stain. Maybe then I wouldn't have wasted 10 years of his life. The first 18 years, he endured a gambling father, a mother who vanished, a sick grandmother, and the weight of supporting an entire family. The next 10, he was shackled to me, a man he never wanted, living in humiliation. My gaze lingered on his cold, beautiful eyes. He bit his lip, lowered his gaze, and at last whispered one trembling word, "Okay." The sound quivered, fragile, almost breaking. And 10 years later, I, Victor Frost, was no longer that reckless young man. Only belatedly did I understand. Kieran Vale should have been free. Kieran never sent me a message. Not surprising. And yet, I couldn't help feeling that familiar dip of disappointment. Funny, isn't it? The older a man gets, the more sentimental he becomes. I handed in my application to my boss. He tried to talk me out of it a few times, but when he saw how firm I was, he finally sighed and signed off. 2/3 of my assets, I transferred them to Kieran, the apartment we once shared. And a letter. A letter of apology. All sealed inside an envelope that would only reach him after I was gone. The only thing I kept for myself was a single photograph, freshly printed. Kieran, in his hoodie, face caught in that rare awkwardness of youth. If I hadn't made such a mess of things, maybe he could have been happier. I slipped the photo into my wallet, buried my head in work, and tried to forget. Morning, Frost. Victor, you're in early today. Wait, wasn't last night someone else's shift? One by one, colleagues filed in, cheerful voices filling the office. I glanced up. 2 young women were huddled together, whispering, their eyes flicking back toward me again and again. I tried to ignore it, but finally sighed, removed my glasses, and asked, "Something the matter?" One of them laughed. "Victor, are you really almost 35? You don't look it at all." I raised an eyebrow. "Don't I? I feel every bit the middle-aged man already." They shook their heads in unison. "No way. If it wasn't for the birthday wall in the lobby, we'd swear you were in your 20s. Ah, the company's birthday board. My date of birth, posted for all to see. Another girl clapped her hands and said brightly, "Ferrari's got nothing on you, Frost. Come on, tell us, do you have someone? Or are you already married?" I didn't really know what she meant by Ferrari, but from her smile I assumed it was praise. Praise like that? I rarely heard it. My face heated despite myself. When she asked about marriage, an image of Kieran's cool, distant face surfaced in my mind. My chest tightened. Quietly I answered, "No. That knot between us, the one that began when he was 18, should come to an end now at 28. "What? No one?" one of them gasped. "Then tell us. Do you like men or women? What's your type?" Their enthusiasm pressed down on me, and I stumbled for words. "Then salvation. You too? Enough chatter during work hours? Can't you see Frost embarrasses easily?" My boss's voice, like a rope pulling me from the quicksand. Grateful, I turned toward him. He lifted a folder in his hand, giving me a meaningful nod to follow. When I reached the office, my boss looked up. "So," he asked, "how's the preparation going?" "Almost ready," I told him. I had it all planned. Today, my last birthday on home soil. Tomorrow, a day of rest. The day after that, departure. But he shook his head. "There's been a situation in Rwanda. You're leaving tonight." "Tonight?" I thought of the unsent message waiting in my phone, and, strangely, felt a flicker of relief. "Yes, tonight," he confirmed. "All right," I nodded. "I'll go back for my suitcase." "Let Jason Monroe take you," my boss said. "He's assigned to go with you." I turned. A tall young man was standing by the door. He gave me a curt nod. "Hello, Jason Monroe." Expression calm, eyes sharp, posture straight as steel. He looked every bit the soldier. I'm 6'1", maybe. And he towered even above me. "Victor Frost," I said politely, shaking his hand. Later, with our bags checked in, we boarded the plane. At first, I thought he was a veteran, but no, he was still active duty. The higher-ups had clearly placed weight on this project. Sitting beside me, eyes closed, arms folded, Jason said evenly, "There's been some trouble. You'll need to investigate when we land." Then he cracked one eye open, studying me. "You look soft. Pretty boy type. Overseas, they like that. Stay close, don't wander, and don't step outside my line of sight." Pretty boy. At 35? I almost laughed. Almost. I must have dozed off because suddenly Jason nudged me awake. "We're here." We disembarked together, and only then did I switch my phone back on. Several unread messages from Kieran. "Today's your birthday. I'm waiting at home." "About the contract. Let's renew it. Consider it my gift to you." "Where are you?" "I called, but you didn't answer." "They said you left on business. Can't you delay just a single day?" "I saw the security footage." "He's younger than me, isn't he?" And the last one, sent right at midnight. "Happy birthday, Victor. You're free now. We're finally nothing to each other." Nothing to each other. The truth is, aside from a handful of his friends, no one ever knew about us. I went out of my way to hide him from my circles. Never let him near my work events. I stayed out of his too. I wanted to leave him a way out, so when the contract ended, he'd be free of me. He must have realized that. Maybe that's why. He was angry. "By the way," Jason's voice cut through my thoughts, "who's Kieran?" My head snapped up. He slung my small bag over his shoulder unaffected by my stare and added matter-of-factly, "You said his name. More than once. Loudly." I narrowed my eyes, searching for words. "Someone I used to love. Funny. Only with a stranger could I say it that plainly. When faced with Kieran's dark, steady gaze, I never could. What answer had I been waiting for from him? What answer would I ever get? It was like Schrodinger's cat. As long as I never opened the box, he still loved me. My pride still stood. Nothing collapsed. But money? Love? Everything I could give him, he no longer needed. The hot wind of a foreign land swept over us, carrying dust and sunlight across a wide, unfamiliar world. Beside me, Jason crossed his arms, eyes sharp as a blade. He seemed as if he could see right through me. But all he said was, "Come on, we'll be late." The work was technical. Every detail had to be checked, every number precise. And because it was a classified project, my phone had been locked away in a box the whole time. By the time I stepped out of the equipment bay, the world outside was drenched in gold, sunset already. I scrubbed the sweat off, changed into clean clothes, and spoke in English with the local contacts, explaining what needed maintenance and what not to overlook. My phone had long since died, screen black. I slipped it back into my pocket anyway and headed for the exit. After work, there's always that strange quiet, a sudden emptiness after hours of pressure. I rubbed my temples. I had no energy left for sightseeing, no strength for anything. All I wanted now was to collapse into a bed and sleep till I forgot my own name. That's when someone blocked my way. Not one of the locals. This man was different. Blonde hair, blue eyes, his grin a little too wide. Rwanda, isn't it? I blinked in confusion. He leaned in, talking fast, his breath uncomfortably close to my face. I only caught a few words from the flood of English. Sweetheart? Gorgeous. Free tonight? Dragging myself out of the haze, I managed to answer in English. How old are you? And you do realize I'm a man, right? 19, he said eagerly. I stared. In 4 years, I could practically be your father. I shook my head. I'm 35. Wrong move. That only seemed to excite him more. Sure, I'd expected people abroad to be open, but not this open. My head ached, my brain already burnt out from hours of calculations, now reduced to mush. I was still trying to think of a polite way to shake him off when, "Sorry," a low voice cut through, steady as stone. "He's taken." A hand landed on my shoulder. I turned and saw him. Jason Monroe. 1 week since we'd last crossed paths, and he looked exactly the same. Sharp-eyed, broad-shouldered, presence commanding without trying. The tension in my spine loosened before I realized it. Compared to his size and that forbidding expression, the blond man didn't stand a chance. After a few awkward mutters, the stranger finally slunk off. Not without slipping me a business card, though. I held it up, half laughing despite myself. Well, very detailed. Even his height and weight are on here. Jason glanced once, snorted coldly. Mediocre. Come on, we're leaving. How are we? I began, but stopped, because he was already straddling a motorcycle. Long legs, broad frame, entirely at ease. I swallowed the words I'd been about to say. I could just take a taxi. I came here for you. His voice was low, his brows drawn like he was annoyed. But when I stepped closer and really looked, he wasn't angry, just watching me. This bike? He said simply, I bought it here. Looks good, doesn't it? I thought you'd like it too. And somehow, beneath that calm, there was a flicker of something else. Not irritation, not command, but a touch of vulnerability. I sighed, helpless. 35 years old, and here I was letting myself get roped in again. Because of one sentence, because Jason Monroe had said it like that. And I knew I'd have no choice but to ride with him. There were no speed limits here. No traffic cameras. Jason drove fast. Too fast. I shut my eyes tight, both arms locked around his waist. The rush of air stung my face. My stomach dropped with every turn. At this speed, I swore I might lift right off the bike. Or worse, end up in a headline tomorrow. Foreign engineer dies in motorcycle crash overseas. Relax. I've got you. Jason's voice cut through the roar of the wind. He must have felt how tense I was, because his hand left the handlebar for a moment, patting mine where they clung around his waist. The gesture was steady, solid, reassuring. And against my better judgment, I believed him. When we finally pulled up to the place I was staying, my legs were jelly. The very first thing I did was plug my dead phone into the charger. Out of the corner of my eye, I could feel Jason watching me, arms folded, silent. Then, after a pause, he asked, You came here alone. Your family was fine with that? It took me a second to catch his meaning. Then I blinked and gave a small shrug. My parents and I don't keep in touch anymore. I don't have a partner. And this project is important. Out of everyone, I was the right choice to come. Jason's reply was quiet, almost offhand. Soft-hearted fool. I couldn't help laughing, shaking my head. Fine, fine, I'm a fool. Now what do you want to eat? That got his attention. His eyes lit up. You can cook? I nodded, glancing at the fridge. But there's not much here. I'll need to buy some things. In truth, back home it was usually Kieran who handled the cooking. I hadn't made a proper meal in a long time. Jason unfolded his arms, voice firm. You're exhausted. Rest. Whatever you need, I'll go get it. I smiled, the tension in me easing for the first time all day. Well then, I won't argue with that. The night wind was cold. Kieran Vale knew the window was open, but he didn't close it. He sat there in nothing but a thin white shirt, shivering faintly, as though punishing himself, or someone else, by refusing to move. In front of him sat the birthday cake he had bought for himself. The candles long since burned out. His stiff eyes slid toward the clock. 8 o'clock. Victor Frost still hadn't come home. Kieran picked up his phone. Still no reply from Victor. That feeling. His chest pulled tight, like he'd been dragged back into an age when he was powerless, desperate. But he wasn't that boy anymore. He wasn't empty-handed. And yet every time he stood in front of Victor, caught in that steady gaze, Kieran was thrown back to his younger self. The years had changed them both. Victor was more seasoned now, his gentleness sharpened by time. His eyes could still soften, though, still look at Kieran like he was the only one in the world. It was a look that made Kieran believe, against his better judgment, that Victor loved him. But he knew better. He knew he was the one who was stiff, awkward, unapproachable, the one who didn't fit. He'd heard the whispers, the rumors, that Victor only liked the young ones, the pretty boys, just like his father once had. Even now, long estranged from that family, Victor hadn't quite escaped the shadow. Kieran knew what he himself had looked like at 18, and that was why he could never shake the belief that he'd just gotten lucky, that Victor had noticed him at the right time, the right place. That was why Victor had spared him some time, some affection, some money, like picking up a stray cat off the street, giving it food, warmth, shelter. Kieran had warned himself again and again, don't fall for it. Don't mistake kindness for love, because when Victor finally pulled away, when the leash was gone, the pain would be unbearable. He refused to be reduced to a pathetic beggar, on his knees for scraps of affection. So when he began earning on his own, he stopped spending Victor's money. The tuition, yes, Victor had paid for that. But every job Kieran worked in college, every late night, every dime, he told himself it was to pay that debt back, though he never dared to repay it in full. Because what if, once the debt was gone, Victor decided he had no reason to stay? What if he found another broken boy to save? That fear, twisted, unrelenting, had dragged him alongside Victor for 10 long years. Kieran was 28 now, not 18. He had his own success, his own confidence. And yet, deep inside, the unease only grew. A man like Victor, mature, gentle, responsible, and undeniably handsome, would always draw people in. There would always be someone new. Nobody stayed 18 forever, but there would always be someone else who was. And Kieran was terrified. Terrified there'd be another boy, another Kieran, who would take his place. That fear had festered until the day he saw Victor standing too close to a young intern, laughing with him, looking at him. That was when Kieran's carefully constructed calm cracked apart. He'd gone to Simon Shaw, Simon who had once been someone's canary in a gilded cage. Kieran thought, maybe I can learn. Maybe I can do better. He still had a decent face. A name. Money of his own. Maybe he could learn how to be the perfect canary, how to please his keeper. But even now, staring at the untouched cake, Kieran's vision blurred. He'd done it wrong. Somehow he'd done everything wrong. Victor had slipped the collar from his neck, taken it back, along with everything that had bound them. The emptiness was worse than the beginning. Desperate, Kieran had drawn up a new contract. He was willing to hand over everything he'd earned. All of it. If Victor would just keep him. If it had begun with a contract, then why not keep them bound that way? But Victor hadn't answered. Silence. And in that silence, Kieran sat waiting, hopeless. Victor had once promised he'd never make him wait, but the contract had expired. And just like that, all those sweet words, all the warmth, all the illusions, vanished with it. I didn't know when I'd fallen asleep. When I woke, Jason Monroe was lying beside me. Then it came back to me. The kitchen had exploded last night. By the time we finished cleaning, everyone was exhausted. Jason's bed had been eaten through by bugs, so he'd had no choice but to share mine. My eyes drifted over to the man sleeping next to me. He slept in perfect order, flat on his back, hands folded neatly over his stomach. I rubbed at my temples, still aching. Then I unlocked my phone. The screen was flooded with missed calls, all from Kieran Vale. Where did you go? Are you going to abandon me too? Just like my mom and dad? Victor, please, can we just talk? I've been waiting for you. A sigh escaped me. I still couldn't bring myself to ignore Kieran's pleas. Pulling on my coat, I stepped quietly onto the balcony and dialed him back. The call connected almost instantly. Different time zones. Had he really been waiting all this time? Hello, Kieran? On the other end, only the sound of shallow breathing. I had to break the silence. You were looking for me? His voice was heavy, thick with a stuffy nose. To anyone else, it would sound like he'd been crying. I just finished work, I explained, almost defensively. My phone was on silent. I only just woke up. His reply came hoarse, raw. I thought you weren't going to talk to me anymore. I let out a helpless laugh. How could I not? Things between us hadn't reached the point of severing completely. No matter what he'd done, it had always been his choice to stop seeing me, not the other way around. You left the country, Kieran said. Not surprising. With his resources, tracking me down was nothing. Yeah, for work. Silence stretched between us. Then his voice returned, tentative. Can I still wait for you to come back? Not can I come find you? Not will you see me again? Just waiting. For once I didn't know what to say. I hadn't expected him to ask that. It didn't fit with the same man who once told me I wasn't young anymore. Back then his words had been sharp, careless. But this felt different. What did he want from me? Why throw out these half-hopeful, half-cruel lines right when I was ready to let go? I couldn't understand him. And yet, I found myself longing to see his eyes again, to read the truth in them, if there was any. But all I had was the cold distance of a phone call. I drew in a slow breath, forcing my voice to sound light, casual, almost smiling. Better not. What's wrong? The question didn't come from the phone. It came from Jason, his voice rough with sleep. Nothing, I murmured. When I looked down again, the call had already ended. Maybe that was it. Maybe that was the last conversation Kieran and I would ever have. The ache that once tore through me had dulled to a faint, lingering itch. I shook my head with a soft, rueful laugh. Kieran Vale ended the call in a panic. Only then did his body remind him. His stomach clenched sharply, as if realizing all at once it had gone too long without food. He curled up in the chair, eyes falling to the plate in front of him. The food had gone cold. His expression was vacant, almost hollow. But in his ears, the echo of that man's voice lingered. He remembered it. The voice he'd heard on the surveillance footage, the one helping Victor Frost carry his luggage. Young, strong, handsome, and clearly younger than him. Was Victor doing it again? Had he picked up some stray who caught his eye, brought him home, and started pouring all his love into that person instead? Would Kieran just fade into the background? His mind replayed his own cruel words. Victor Frost? He's stiff, boring, and besides, he's not young anymore. But was he really talking about Victor? No. He'd been talking about himself. Stiff, boring, not young anymore. He hated admitting it, hated the bitterness that welled up inside him. So he weaponized it instead, tossing those words out like a curse, hoping others would believe them, hoping they'd stop looking at Victor, because Victor was all he had left. Victor could walk away from this love whenever he wanted. And as the years passed, his beauty only deepened, that quiet grace pulling more and more people toward him. Everyone wanted him. Everyone would fall for him. And Kieran, even in a hoodie, the maturity etched into his features betrayed him. He couldn't go back to being 18, no matter how hard he tried. Victor's pity for him was fading. Victor came home less and less. Every time he'd look at Kieran like he had something to say, but stopped just short. Was he thinking of ending their contract early? Of discarding him cleanly, without a second thought? No. Kieran clenched his fists. No, he couldn't allow that. He wouldn't even let himself think it. But what could he do? What could he possibly do? Back in college, Victor Frost never once came to pick him up. He remembered it clearly. One of his dorm mates was dating a girl from another school. When graduation came, she drove right up to the campus gate to collect him. His friend had a mountain of luggage, so Kieran Vale went along to help carry things to the car. On the way back, the girl glanced at him curiously. What about you? I've never seen your partner. It's already senior year. Kieran's lashes trembled. He had always told people quietly, almost carelessly, that he already had someone. But now, put on the spot, he lowered his eyes and whispered, He's just too busy. His roommate snorted. Busy for 4 years straight? Come on, admit it. You just made someone up so you wouldn't get hounded by all those admirers. Everyone burst out laughing. They meant nothing by it. But Kieran's heart clenched. Because at that time, he still held on to hope. Still allowed himself to dream. What if Victor really did like him? That night, he waited at home. When Victor finally returned, Kieran rushed forward, slipping off his coat, pressing a hot cup of tea into his hands. The man looked exhausted, his clothes carrying the sharp scent of alcohol. Not a good moment to ask for anything. Still, Kieran guided him to the sofa, gently massaging his temples, and asked softly, I'm graduating next week. Do you have time? Could you maybe come pick me up? But when his gaze met Victor's tired eyes, the words died on his lips. He couldn't do it. He wasn't allowed to ask for things. Victor understood anyway. He always understood. With that soft, apologetic look in his eyes, he said, Sorry, I've been too busy lately. Congratulations on graduating. I'll transfer $50,000 into your account. Was that a gift or a warning not to step out of line? Kieran shook his head quickly. No, I don't want that. Victor tilted his head, voice uncharacteristically gentle, softened by drink. Then what do you want? Tell me. A gift. Anything. Kieran's voice came out barely above a whisper. A photo. Just the rights to a single photo. That's enough. All right then. If Victor didn't love him, he would accept it. At least he could have that one picture tucked away in his wallet during graduation season. So when his friends laughed and teased, he could smile and show them. He really did have a boyfriend. It was just his boyfriend was always too busy. Back then, Kieran Vale could still lie to himself. And even now, he tried to do the same. He started avoiding Victor Frost. Anything to keep from hearing those words he dreaded most, termination of the contract. Until that night, he pushed open the door of the private room, and there Victor was. A long black trench coat draped across his shoulders, rimless glasses perched on his nose. Dignified, orderly, and calm, like a polished mirror. Soft yet untouchable. Time had only favored him. The faint lines at the corners of his eyes did not diminish his beauty. They made him more alluring. On nights in bed, Kieran could never resist pressing his lips to those fine lines, longing to see Victor's composed face melt into desire. Victor had walked into his life at the very best moment. But Kieran had never seen what Victor looked like at 18. What would he have been like? Surrounded by admirers, commanding attention with a word, or maybe fumbling shyly in pursuit of someone he liked, eyes sincere, hands awkward. Kieran didn't dare imagine. He only stared. And of course, Victor still found him. The joy of seeing him was short-lived. It turned to dread like a splash of cold water down his back. Could Victor really be so impatient? Willing to show up in front of his friends, only to drag him home and end everything? When Simon Shaw's gaze lingered on Victor, Kieran quickly stepped in front of him, shoulders stiff. This is my person. No one else is allowed to look at him like that. But Kieran didn't dare step closer. Didn't dare ask. Didn't dare explain. Part of him hoped Victor would ask, That thing you said, what did you mean by it? But what would he say, if he did? Victor didn't ask. Instead, he simply watched the chaos unfold before him, his expression patient, detached, like an adult indulging a child's play acting. At last, he said quietly, Kieran, we should talk. Inevitable. Kieran's heart sank. He knew this day would come, the day he would be abandoned. And yet, in that instant, his eyes lingered on the cigarette's faint glow at Victor's lips, and all he could say was, Smoking's bad for your health. Because he worried for him. Because he cared for him. If Victor truly told him to leave, then he would. Home. Empty. Kieran drifted through the apartment like a ghost. He opened the wardrobe. Inside still hung the white hoodie he had picked out. He had even sought out Simon Shaw once, asking how to be more like him, how to look younger, how to dress, how to speak, how to hold his patron's gaze for just a little longer. But it hadn't worked. Simon had even clashed with Victor. So Kieran dismissed him. Simon had sneered, spitting threats as he stormed out. Kieran wasn't afraid. He had nothing left but Victor. And yet now, Victor wasn't alone anymore. There was someone else by his side. Kieran couldn't bear to tangle himself in it, so he had followed that other man, far away, thousands of miles. At last, the young man pressed a hand to his eyes, tears. He hadn't cried in so long. The scorching sunlight, the heavy heat, the endless grind of work. All of it kept me from drowning in grief. You need rest. Jason Monroe leaned against the wall, arms crossed, frowning at me. His voice carried quiet disapproval. When I was on missions in the army, even then, I didn't run myself into the ground like this. I let out a bitter laugh, rubbing at my temples. I know my limits. Doesn't look like it. You need rest. His voice was firm, cold. I shook my head. I know what I'm doing. This is something only I can handle, and it's dangerous. I need to be absolutely precise. Jason's eyes narrowed. Victor, today's New Year's Eve. Yeah, isn't your unit holding a party? Why aren't you there? He arched a brow, tilting his chin toward me, as if to say, because of you. I gave a helpless smile. When he lifted his head like that, he looked like a proud wildcat. You need a cigarette and a bottle of liquor, Jason said simply. Sit down. Talk it out. That's the only way to fix what's eating you alive. I raised a brow. And what, this is part of your assignment too? His dark eyes locked on mine. This isn't a soldier's mission. It's Jason's mission. He held out a bottle of alcohol. Let's talk. Those words, let's talk. I had said them countless times to Kieran Vale, but now, with Jason right in front of me, staring at me with those unwavering eyes, I didn't know how to begin. I took the bottle, tipped it back. One burning gulp. Maybe I should have been braver, I muttered. Like when I was young, reckless, charging forward without looking back. Then maybe this confusion wouldn't have eaten away at me. The pain would have been sharp, yes, but clean, final. I laughed bitterly. But I'm too much of a coward, so I keep dragging it out. My head tells me one day this will resolve itself. But my heart, it begs me, just one more day. Don't confront him yet. If you do, maybe he'll walk away. Maybe he'll never be by my side again. Maybe it was the words. Maybe it was the alcohol burning my chest. But my eyes stung. My throat tightened. Jason didn't interrupt. He just sat there, silent, listening. I poured another glass. That summer. The memory spilled out. That was the first time I met Kieran Vale. He was crouched by the grass, head bowed as he fed a stray kitten. He was thin. Too thin. Wearing an ill-fitting coat in the middle of winter. His lunch was 2 plain buns, sometimes, if he was lucky, an egg. And yet, he still saved money every day to buy food for that cat. I had been stunned by that beautiful face, and without meaning to, I found myself watching for him every time I passed by. But he never once looked back at me, until one day, I passed by, and the cat was gone. I pretended to be a fellow cat lover, standing nearby as I glanced around, mumbling, Huh? Where's the stray that used to hang around here? Kieran swallowed a bite of his bun. His eyes never lifted to mine, his voice soft as he replied, I found someone kind to take it in. Now it has a home. Otherwise, feeding a stray is just hurting it more. I pressed my lips together, murmured a small and almost asked the question that burned at my tongue. What about you? Do you have a home? Why are you eating nothing but plain buns every day? The urge to understand him only grew stronger. And that was when love began. The alcohol was working its way through me. My head felt heavy, my words slurring at the edges. Summer was hot, the cicadas were loud, but his eyes were beautiful. Every time I looked at him, it was like plunging into cool water. I exhaled slowly, my chest tight, but the way I handled it, it was wrong, so wrong. At first, I didn't realize, and when I finally did, it was already too late. I'd invested too much, followed the rules too carefully. I was terrified that any change would shatter everything beyond repair. Jason Monroe's voice cut through the haze, quiet but precise. You're just afraid of him leaving you. The truth is, you don't even know if he loves you back. My eyes narrowed, and I nodded. His words struck dead center. Yes. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. After all, I'm not young anymore. I slid a cigarette from the pack, handed it to him. Mind? He took it casually. Light. I smirked faintly, then asked, So, you want to spend New Year's Eve with 3 people instead of 2? Seems like a night made for reunions. Jason bit down on the unlit cigarette, his expression unreadable. Exactly. My brain froze for a few seconds. You mean, colleagues are coming? He leaned back, voice calm. That man you keep talking about. Kieran Vale. I saw him standing outside your office when I came back. I've seen his photo. Knew he was here for you. So I brought him along. Jason struck my lighter out of my hand, lowering his head to spark his cigarette from mine instead. Smoke curled from his lips as he added, almost casually, He's downstairs right now, crying. My chest clenched. Jason's hawk-like eyes lifted to mine, a faint smirk curling at the edges of his mouth. Well, want to see him? After all. His tone dropped, sharp and unflinching. It can't really get any worse than this. Can it? He didn't have Victor Frost anymore. But to let Victor vanish completely from his world, that was something Kieran Vale simply couldn't do. So there he was, squatting downstairs, wiping at his eyes. And the worst part? He hadn't even come on his own. He'd been brought here by his most hated rival, the one who carried himself like he was the rightful one, the one with the claim. Jason Monroe's voice had been flat, almost cold. I can only bring you this far. I don't know if Victor even wants to see you. Kieran had lowered his head, his voice breaking. It's New Year's Eve. I just want to stay as close to him as possible. And then he crouched down in the corner, and the tears just started spilling again. It was pathetic. He knew it. Victor had spoiled him, let him grow soft, made him used to warmth he never thought he'd have. Back then, he could swallow every kind of hardship without complaint. But now just a stretch of days without seeing Victor, and he was crumbling, falling apart. What was he crying for? Victor was right there, in a place Kieran could always reach if he was stubborn enough. He could rent a place here, stay close, see Victor every day. So what if Victor liked them younger now? Kieran was the one who had been with him the longest, the one who fit him best. And if it came to it, well, there were always ways. Surgery, lifts, powder, and polish. He still had time to make sure Victor couldn't let him go. Kieran, through a blur of tears, he thought he heard Victor Frost's voice. Was Victor asking, "Why are you here? Why are you crying?" No, that had to be an illusion. After what he'd said, those cruel, thoughtless words, Victor couldn't possibly have come down for him. Kieran squeezed his eyes shut, refusing to listen, shaking his head at the tall shadow before him. His voice cracked as he whispered, desperate, trembling, "I love you. I can be the one who gives, who clings. I'll pay to be your canary. I'll beg to stay your little lover. It's been 10 years. Don't do this to me. Don't leave without a word." It was surrender, like handing over his heart to the victor and admitting defeat. Take my love. Wound me with it if you must. I can't stop myself. He couldn't pretend to walk away with dignity. And then he saw Victor. Saw him sigh, saw him crouch down beside him. His voice was low, the words drawn out as if softened by wine. "Didn't you read the letter I wrote you?" Kieran blinked, then honestly shook his head. He hadn't dared. It was still hidden under his pillow, unopened. "I knew it," Victor chuckled faintly. "At the top, I apologized. I wasn't trying to buy you with desire. I liked you. Always did. I was just too young then, and I chose the wrong way." Kieran shook his head quickly, words tumbling out. No, you don't need to apologize. You helped me. If anyone should apologize, it's me." Victor's gaze softened. "Then why did you never spend the money I gave you?" Eyes downcast, Kieran murmured, "Because I can earn my own. I couldn't spend yours. That would mean I owed you too much. I wanted us to be equal. I wanted to work hard, save money, and then confess to you properly. I saved everything into that card you gave me, saving it as my dowry." Victor laughed, though his face was wet with tears. A sharp word slipped from his lips. He wasn't sure if it was meant for Kieran or himself. "I should be the one apologizing. The things that Canary said, those tricks, I never played them, not once. I was just terrified someone else would take you away from me. I hated myself for it." Kieran's voice went hoarse, thick with tears. "I was never any good at being your canary. Too stiff, too boring. I only knew how to lower my head and endure. But I'll change. I'll do better. Just let me stay by your side." And then he saw it. Victor, nodding. He saw him pull a photo from his wallet. His photo. Kieran's exhausted, sleepless mind spun dizzy with shock. His cheeks flushed, his eyes shone bright. Before Victor could say another word, Kieran shoved the bank card into his hand and whispered, muffled, "I'm going to faint." There was no need to explain the pain, the hardship of the road that had brought him here. He simply let his eyes fall shut, and this time, he collapsed safely. Collapsed right into Victor Frost's waiting arms. And Kieran Vale could finally rest there.